It's time for us to admit that we don't do comprehensive well. It's time for us to admit that the era of the 1,000-page bill is over. Look at immigration in 2007. We had a lot of very good senators working on the bill. Senator Kennedy, Senator McCain, Senator Kyle, Senator Martinez working very hard. It got 34 votes. Then it got 46 votes, but it needed 60 votes, and it fell of its own weight. Then economy-wide cap and trade. Senator McCain and Senator Lieberman worked on a bill 2 or 3 years ago. I think it got just 36 votes. And then last year, the Warner-Lieberman version of the bill got 48 votes, and it needed 60 votes. And earlier this year, we had 66 or 67 senators, including 24 Democrats, who voted to say, don't put the economy-wide cap and trade comprehensive bill through the so-called reconciliation process, the budget process, which would only take 50 votes to pass. And then add to that, health care is in the ditch. I mean, the president has said that there can't be any deficit added to by the health care bill, so that kills dead on the doornail. The House passed, not even passed by the House health care bill, which has been worked on by several committees over there. It kills dead on the doornail the Senate health care bill, because both add to the debt in the next 10 years, and according to the Congressional Budget Office and others who've reviewed it, add to the debt in the 10 years after that. So if the president said he won't sign a bill with any deficit, the House bill's dead on the doornail, and the Senate bill is dead on the doornail. And we still have unresolved problems even if you fix the debt problem. We have the president saying that he's going to take the savings out of Medicare to pay for the bill. And many of us believe that any Medicare savings ought to be spent on Medicare. We ought not to take money from grandma's Medicare and spend it on anybody other than grandma, because the program's about to go broke in 2017. And the Democratic as well as the Republican governors are worried about what the governor of Tennessee called the mother of unfunded mandates, when these bills say, well, we're going to expand Medicaid, and we might pay for it a few years in Washington, and after that we're going to shift it to the states with hundreds of millions of dollars of new state taxes. Employees are worried about taxes in a recession. There are worries among older Americans, seniors, about whether some government individual is going to say you can't have your hip replaced because you're 70 years old. So if debt hasn't killed the Senate and the House bills, all these other issues are still out there. So I propose we take a page from a famous little book, which was widely passed out in Iowa and New Hampshire during 1995 and 1996. It's called Lamar Alexander's Little Plaid Book. I used it when I ran for president of the United States. Obviously, not enough people read it for me to be successful. And it has lots of good instructions about rules, lessons, and reminders about running for office and making a difference, whether you're president of the United States or president of your senior class. And here's Rule 259. Keep in mind that enough small steps in the right direction will still get you where you want to go. Mr. President, keep in mind that enough small steps in the right direction will still get you where you want to go. I think we should take that advice. I think it's plainly obvious that we in Congress have been biting off more than we can chew in immigration, in health care, and in other issues. We've been producing 1,000-page bills, which in truth most members of Congress haven't even read, and in which voters have no confidence, and out of which will come unintended consequences and results that are bad for our country. And the worst consequence is that the ambition of ours is so large to solve these problems that it inevitably adds to the debt, the national debt, the government's debt, our taxpayer debt, at a time when we're adding $9 trillion to the debt in just 10 years, and everyone is worried about how we're going to pay that back. And at a time, fairly or unfairly, where the American people are seeing a new administration, it seems like, with a new Washington takeover every other day, taking over banks, taking over insurance companies, taking over student loans. Nobody asked them to take over student loans. They're just going to take them all over. All 15 million student loans are suddenly going to be run out of the United States Department of Education. Taking over your farm pond, taking over health care, taking over car companies, maybe taking over climate change by having a czar in the Environmental Protection Administration just wave a magic wand and impose it on the country. The American people see 32 so-called czars who are unaccountable, and it looks like a runaway federal government with no checks and balances. Senator Byrd, the senior Democrat, has warned about the consequences of these unaccountable czars. Senator Hutchison and Senator Collins, senior Republicans, have warned about that. So, Mr. President, instead of 1,000-page bills that don't succeed and in which the people of this country have no confidence, I suggest we change course. We follow Rule 259 in the Little Plaid Book, and we begin to work on major issues facing our country, step by step, to re-earn the trust of the American people, to begin to solve the big challenges of this country. We bite off what we can swallow. We make sure we get it right. And after we've taken the first steps, then we can take another series of steps until we eventually resolve the problem. A few steps in the right direction are a good way to get where you want to go. Now, how would this work in practice? Let's take health care. Instead of $1 trillion, 1,000-page comprehensive health care government-run plan, as a first step, we might allow small business pooling to reduce health care costs, increase accessibility for small business owners, unions, associations, their workers, members, and families. This bill's been here for 4 years. It's ready to pass. There are actually competing bills, but the estimates are it would add 1 million workers who small businesses could afford to cover by insurance. That's a good step in the right direction. Reform medical malpractice laws so runaway junk lawsuits don't continue to drive up the cost of health care. In Tennessee, there's 60 counties where there aren't any OB/GYN doctors. That means mothers in those 60 counties of Tennessee have to drive a long way. They have to drive to Memphis, maybe 60 miles, to get their prenatal health care to have their babies. The president mentioned the other night some steps about junk runaway lawsuits. So there's a second small step we could take that could make a big difference about cost, which is the real issue in health care. Third, allow individual Americans the ability to purchase health insurance across state lines, as they can with automobile insurance today. We could probably agree on that here, and it'd probably make a difference. I used to be a governor, so I've got an aversion to not respecting state lines, but in this case, we may need to do this because the cost of health insurance could come down if we did it, and cost is what we're focused on. 4, ensure that Americans who currently require for existing programs like Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program but are not enrolled, sign them up. There are 11 million Americans, 20% of all of the uninsured people in this country, are eligible for current government programs called Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program, but they haven't signed up. Rather than wringing our hands rather than passing some new 1,000-page bill to try to run up the debt and deal with uninsured people, why don't we just sign up the uninsured people who are already eligible for programs? Create health insurance exchanges so Americans can find affordable coverage. The president mentioned that the other night. It's in almost all the Republican bills. In other ways, that's just a marketplace, a shopping center, where you can go look for a variety of programs. Enact meaningful insurance market reforms, meaning that you're guaranteed that you can get a policy, and that if you have a pre-existing condition, you can get affordable coverage. Now, if we did this, this would probably raise the cost of insurance for some Americans. It would mean that every American would either have to be automatically enrolled or have to be enrolled, but a lot of Americans are getting tired of paying an extra $1,000 on their health insurance just so you don't have to buy any until you're on your way to the emergency room. So this says Maybe we can do that as well. Those are just 6, but 6 steps of that size in the right direction are a good way to get where we want to go. And then if we can pass those, Mr. President, maybe we can pass 6 more. Or take clean energy. What have we got facing us out of the House of Representatives? A massive contraption, spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year, causing us to lose millions of jobs under a cap and trade economy-wide climate bill. That climate bill that is proposed over there would raise the electric bill for every American and raise the price of your fuel at the gasoline tank. It's a high-cost energy and climate change bill. Well, instead of a high-cost energy and climate change bill, how about a low-cost one? A few steps in the right direction. What about building 100 new nuclear plants in 20 years? That would double the amount of nuclear power that we produce. Nuclear power, 70% of our carbon-free electricity. Isn't carbon-free electricity supposed to be our goal? And didn't we invent nuclear power in the Atoms for Peace program? Isn't the rest of the world now way ahead of us? And haven't our Navy submarines operated safely since the 1950s and effectively with nuclear power? And doesn't Dr. Chu, the Energy Secretary for this administration and Nobel Prize winner, say that they operate safely in America and that we can safely store the waste for the next 40 or 60 years while we decide how to reprocess it so it doesn't produce plutonium? All the answers to all that's yes, so why not build 100 nuclear plants in 20 years? We've done it before, we can do it again. We can make half the cars and trucks plug in electric cars and trucks in 20 years. I think we can agree on that on both sides of the aisle. And we can do that without building any new power plants because we have so much unused electricity at night that if we just plug in at night at a cheap rate, we can fuel our cars and reduce our imported foreign oil and keep our fuel prices low, use less gas, clean the air, and deal with climate change all at once. 3, offshore exploration for natural gas and oil. We need plenty of natural gas if we want our manufacturing companies to stay here with their jobs. We need plenty of natural gas. Every new big power plant built in the last 20 years has been a natural gas plant because it has less carbon than coal. And we don't want to be importing natural gas in the same way we import oil, so let's do that. And then double clean energy research and development. Instead of subsidizing entrepreneurs, let's have a mini Manhattan project for the most promising efforts to make solar cost competitive, to make recapture of carbon from existing coal plants, to have better electric batteries, for advanced biofuels, some of the crops we don't eat. So there are 4 steps in the right direction on clean energy, which would actually lower our prices instead of a 1,000-page bill, which would begin to collect hundreds of billions of dollars a year and put much of it in a slush fund that Congress would spend and raise your taxes, have all sorts of unforeseen consequences, send manufacturing jobs fleeing overseas. That would be what we shouldn't do. Or immigration. I mentioned immigration before and how the best members of this body were trying hard on immigration and it fell of its own weight. I don't think we can pass a comprehensive immigration bill, but I think we can take several steps in the right direction, such as a secure work card, a tamper-proof worker ID card to make sure workers are legal. Senator Schumer has talked about that. I join him in talking about it. Most of the people who are illegally here are here to work, and if they have to prove they're legally here, that'll dry up the number of people illegally here, and then we can deal with that. Achieve full operational control of our borders. President Bush and the Congress made a lot of progress on that, not always recognized, but we could finish it. Help legal Americans, immigrants and new Americans learn English and learn civics and learn American history and assimilate into our society, learn what it means to be an American. We could take the first steps on debt and fiscal responsibility. Instead of more bailouts and doubling our debt, which is the route that we're on, we could end government ownership of car companies. We could have a bipartisan commission to control spending. We call that the Greg Conrad bill because it means the commission would decide how to control spending, recommend it to us, and we would vote up or down, or a similar BRAC-like commission to do the same thing. There are other steps we could take to reduce the debt. We might not be able to reduce it all in one day or all in one bill, but a few steps in the right direction to reduce the debt are a good way to get where we want to go. And same on taxes. Instead of a complicated tax code that penalizes working families, we probably would fail if we came in with a comprehensive proposal to change the tax code. In fact, President Bush asked two respected former members of the Senate, Breaux and Connie Mack and others, to recommend a plan to us, and they recommended a pretty good plan, and it got lost in the dark. Nobody ever heard another word of it, probably because it was a comprehensive plan. Why don't we take a few steps in the right direction, like an optional one-page flat tax, like doubling the child tax credit to make it easier for parents to be better parents, like ending the death tax on families with assets of less than $5 million. And then coming up soon, and we had a bipartisan breakfast this morning, 15 senators attended, listened to Senator Dodd, a Democrat, Senator Shelby, a Republican, talk about financial regulatory reform. After the near collapse of the economy a year ago, we all know we need that. And we'd be best off doing it in a bipartisan way. But again, rather than come up with a 1,000 or 2,000 page bill on financial regulatory reform, maybe we could take a few steps in the right direction. Bipartisanship helps, but it's not, as some might say, an opportunity to sing kumbaya. The Senate is a place for differences of opinion, vigorously expressed. If we didn't have those, we wouldn't be here. The real value of bipartisanship is a better bill, and a bill in which the people who elected us will have confidence. Such bipartisanship is absolutely essential to any comprehensive bill and even to a few steps. We had it on the energy bill of 2005, which got 74 votes. We had it on the America Competes Act, which got 70 co-sponsors. The Gang of 16 had it when we were dealing with Supreme Court nominees. And on the controversial TARP vote, we had bipartisan support with 74 votes. And how did we get it? We worked in the open with no secrets. Everyone gets credit. I'm afraid that even when we have that spirit, the problems we have to tackle are so large that we need to begin to solve them in pieces. These are problems we must solve, but we are not a debating society. In the end, we need to get a result. And I've concluded that the best way to get a result on health care, on immigration, on other major issues facing our country is to put aside the 1,000-page bills and re-earn the trust of the American people by working step by step to begin to solve the challenges facing our country. I thank the President and I yield the floor.